Great. Welcome to everybody. Thank you all for attending. I'd like to call to order the July 6th, 2023 Audit and Finance Committee meeting. First up is item 1B. I would like to change and add an item, and it's only for informational purposes at the end so that we could discuss it. And that is really a little bit about the the committee charter and some discussions that Ms. Jacqueline and I have been having that are going to really kind of affect some of the edit proposals that we'll be presenting. And the other one is just to get a procedural one discussion on the two new committee members. So I think I can take those directly to the board. I just want to, so if there's any objection to that, that's the only changes I'd like to do to the audit, and that would, to the agenda, and that'd be at the end of the meeting.
So is that going to 3E and 3F, or are we taking that to 4?
Yeah, I would agree. That's, Darren, I think that's a great idea. I'd make it 3F and 3G.
Yeah, 3E and 3F.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Good seeing you.
Yes, sir.
With that being said, I'd like to take a vote on any objections. Are there any objections to amending the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is so amended. I'd move on to the approval of the last hearings meeting. Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Real quick, I think we need to vote on 1B.
That's correct. We're up to 1C.
Yeah, we need to actually take a vote on 1B.
I'll move to approve 1B.
Second.
Any objections? Can I have a vote?
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? No hearing, no objections. The ayes have it. Moving on to 1C. I think that'll make it easier, Darren. Is the approval of the minutes, and it's approval of the minutes of the last meeting. To any discussion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? None. Hearing none. Motion passed. The minutes are approved. Moving on to item 2A, which is the fixed cost of ownership for the FY24 budget reallocation. And under that, the recommended action to take to the board is to approve the reallocation of funds as shown in the attached resolution. Mr. Hammer.
Yes.
Or Jeff.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So subsequent to the approval of our FY24 FCO budget, there's some requirements that came to light for FM to do some additional work at North Charleston High School athletic facilities. So we looked within our existing budget to see if we could find some ways to reallocate and find some more funds for this. So that's what this does. This provides some more funds for athletic improvements, mostly at Garrett. There's some at Stall High School. And also, we also identified that we need to find some more money to try to do some more trailers that anticipate some growth at schools at Stall and at Mount Zion. So this tries to get money from our existing budget and allocate it so we can do these additional projects.
Are there any questions from the committee members?
Yes, for looking at what you're pulling from the trailer relocation, that's coming from where?
So if you're looking at where the money is coming from in the budget, we had identified an amount that we would set aside for any trailer relocation. Throughout the course of the year, and we saw this was the case last year, there's some emergent requirements, and we wanted to make sure that in the FY24 budget, we had some capacity to move some trailers or establish some new trailers. And so that's exactly what's happening, and we're moving that money to try to support what we're doing at Stall and at Mount Zion.
Mm-hmm. And the St. John's Park renovation phase 1, that's being pushed to when?
Well, the work is still going to start. What we're doing is reducing or changing some of the scope, which will reduce a little bit of what we were going to try to do this year. We're still going to do the project, but Mr. Calhoun, and working with the city as we developed the design and went to the technical review board, the city, which owns that park, identified some additional storm drainage requirements. And it's pretty substantial. It wasn't something that was anticipated when we designed the project. We just focused on upgrading the fields and providing some more amenities there. But as you know, it's not our property. And for it to get approved, the city has to give us permits based on those storm drainage. So what I'm doing is taking some of the money that we had for upgrading the fields and addressing those storm drainage projects this year. But I think actually having the fields usable, upgraded to the level that we've designed, that's probably going to be pushed back to at least a few more months.
And if I could add, Mr. Calhoun, that's also a multi-year project too. So Mr. Hamer will be back next year for the second phase of that project. So this is a project we did not expect to complete this year.
So we still are on track to have phase 2 start for FY25.
Yes, sir. Now we will redefine what is phase 2 as I get the final costs for these storm drainage projects that need to be worked, which includes widening some ditches, putting in some new drainage systems, some different types of grading. Then I'll know a little bit more specifically what I'm going to be able to accomplish with the money that I have left over and what we'll ask for in 25. I'll be able to come back to make a recommendation to Mr. Roy and to this group, but not until I get some additional estimates.
And my last question would be with the Charles Pickney Elementary School stormwater design. Are we running into the same problem there?
Well, no, that really is us and FM identifying that there were some flooding problems there, and we thought we would be able to get at that quicker. It's not in a dire situation, but it was something my folks and my engineers thought we could use the money for this fiscal year's FCO allocation to address. I think we'll be fine to push that to the right. We'll still have people there watching that and doing other things that would mitigate it. But this is a recommendation, I think, of something that we can pull some money for these other priorities.
Thank you.
So this is all part of this fluid process of moving back. So and I don't want to assume, but all of these items that we're pulling this money from are still ongoing, plan to be ongoing, and hopefully accomplished.
That's right.
Budget. Exactly. We're just taking the money right now. And because really the Garrett is only about $100,000 of improvements that we're looking at.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So what we're pulling the money from, really nothing is being canceled. If you look at the first 4 items, the trailer replacement, I'm just realigning that to a smaller scope that you will see on the list of the attachment that we've signed. As I just mentioned, the stormwater project at Charles Pickney, we're just going to delay that and mitigate it with maybe some things I can do internally to make sure that that's not a problem. The School of Art doors, that's not going away. We're just going to find maybe another time to do that. Again, that's not impacting school operations. And again, we're going to do a different approach to the phases of St. John's Park or Johns Island Park.
But and the biggest expense is just the facilities maintenance, and I'm assuming that's line item and itemized at some point.
Well, what you're seeing there is showing the difference between what was in our original allocation and what this allocation takes away from that. So it's a delta between what we have already approved for 24, and if we execute these projects, that's taken away from that delta. So that's why we presented it in that way.
Excellent. Any further questions from the committee? And I'd like to propose a motion to move the reallocation of funds as shown on the attached resolution on item 2A to the board for consideration. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Hearing none, the motion passes. Moving on to item 2C. No, am I jumping ahead? 2B, approval of contracts greater than $250,000. The recommended motion to approve the contracts through June 21st, 2023. Ms. Carlin.
Thank you, sir. As you just mentioned, these are the contracts over $250,000 through June 21st, 2023. And they include contracts dealing with staff development, contracted teachers and staff, general contractor services, And there are 2 change orders for a construction management firm and architectural service. There are 10 projects overall totaling $12.4 million.
So, any questions from the committee?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the change order for number 7?
Yes, sir. This is Jasmine Shaw. Number 7 is the change order for the general contractor / architectural service. This is a design build project. So the architect and the GC are working together. Last month, when we came to the board or came to Audit and Finance, and we essentially got board approval to increase Carolina Park by $7 million to go from a 1-story to a 2-story. That request was for the use of $7 million. Now we're coming back on the 250 list, and we're having to increase the actual general contractors costs associated with the additional scope of work. And so this is giving it to the general contractor for $1.4 million as the change. So last month was the request to use 7 million. Of that will be 1.4 for the general contractor. And since it's over 250, we have to put it on a 250 list.
Okay, so this is not asking for the extra 1.4. This is just to use the 1.4 for the actual.
That's correct, within the 7 million that we requested.
Okay.
I have a few questions on items 8 and 9. I'm assuming I'm going to be talking to Ms. Simmons on these too. I just want to make it very clear that none of these funds are being allocated toward any EL programs or any EL materials in violation of what the Department of Ed has told us. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. So the Department of Education, I have documentation here from Matthew Ferguson from an inquiry I made about how we should proceed with EL. And while the State Department is no longer funding EL for Palmetto Literacy Project schools, this decision by the South Carolina Department of Education to no longer support the purchase of EL materials does not limit the ability of local school boards to make curricular decisions for its schools. So with that, the Deputy Superintendent and I are making a recommendation to move forward for the current school year with EL as a transition year as the State Department rolls out a new adoption process for new materials that will be prepared and ready for use in the 2024-2025 school year. So what you have in number 8 and 9 are 1, supplementary materials that are replenishable, consumable materials that kids use, and we tear it out of a notebook and we have to replenish every year. And the other is the related professional development for teachers. We do believe that it's our responsibility to continue with our curriculum in a responsible manner so that teachers have what they need to teach and our scholars have the benefit of continuing with the improvements we've seen in scholar outcomes as evidenced by the spring summary data that we shared a couple of weeks ago with the board.
So item 9 is all materials, and then item 8, which is almost $3.5 million, is that's for curriculum planning, bringing in outside vendors.
Number 9 are the replenishables, the consumables, and number 8 is the professional learning. So I think it's important to note that that PD is not specific, unique or exclusive to EL. That particular framework allows teachers to execute any curriculum. So it may be EL this year, it may be a different one in the subsequent year, but that's professional learning for not only teachers, for our teacher leaders, our administrators as well. You might recall in some of the conversations we've had about EL, Ms. Waters in particular has asked, how do we expand some of this PD that our we started with acceleration schools. So this particular outfit has been in our acceleration schools for 2 years. They're going on year 3. This package allows us to spread that to more schools, more teachers, more classrooms.
Hey, Mr. Grabowski, if I may, Ms. Simmons. Today, Ms. Simmons and Betsy Reidenbach, Terry Nichols, and Dr. Gallion and I met with Mrs. Watley and Mrs. Bailey to review the transition plan for the coming year, which like Mrs. Simmons referenced, includes about January, working with the State Department of Education, the textbook caravan, and all local stakeholders to choose a new textbook adoption series for the coming year. But the plan that we have in place for the current year has engaged Betsy Reidenbach and groups of teachers who have reworked pieces of the EL curriculum to make it more user-friendly, one, for teachers, B, to make more resources available to parents about what their children are learning, and C, to provide alternatives to some of the controversial issues that have been raised by EL from the stakeholder groups in which we were involved in the spring.
And that's one of the things I was going to recommend. I really think what the board has to start doing is getting this education committee up and running with the right people in it. So, because when you come to me at this point, I shouldn't be having to say, hey, are you following the law? I mean, we got litigation out there that's going to be all over this. You know, any material you bring in, they're going to dig into this thing until this litigation is resolved. So we know we're under the guns on this. I mean, EL is not, widely used in this state at all. I mean, I think we're the only district that did it. I mean, even Lexington only did it in like 2 schools. So
They've been using it for 10 years though.
Yeah, in those 2 schools, and it worked well. And, and I won't argue that because, I heard the argument for it from those 2 schools, but it wasn't district wise. And see, my big concern is this got pushed through so hard last August. I want to know where all the material is that we had from the old curriculum, so teachers have the choice to use the old, materials that they had back in August. Because then, that's what we want to give. We want to give the teachers the ability to teach with something that they're very comfortable, not with something that we made a decision on August and suddenly said, here, go do this. And we saw what happened. It settled down, obviously, to your credit. So
We haven't had a comprehensive curriculum in Charleston County School District in excess of 10 years. So the materials you're mentioning is open court. That's specific and unique to phonics. That's a package. That's a program. That's a standalone. We still have those, and the schools that asked to use those materials back in August of 2022 were allowed to do so. And so we've supported schools with the transition by allowing them to onboard EL in a really strategic way. It's a heavy lift, as you've heard a lot. And so we allowed the schools who opted to continue with open court to do so, and we'll continue to support them.
And that's, I think that's really where we need to be going, is towards, the teachers are, until we can get this curriculum adopted, at the higher level, and you giving the choices and work through it with the parents being involved, the teachers being involved, but making sure that the teachers do have that ability to teach, use what they feel is comfortable, use what they feel is working. I mean, but what I really want to try to do is to get this staff working with the education committee so that when you come to me, or not to me, but to our committee, we're really just looking at the finance side of it. And I'm not asking you this, the hard questions. I like fluff questions, but, I don't want to put you on the spot, but, obviously with what's going on in the legislature, and, the legislators have been back in town lately, and I've seen an awful lot of them. And boy, you hear a lot of talk of what's going to happen next year, and you're just going like, wow, really? But nevertheless,
Sure, we understand and really appreciate.
we're just really under Charleston right now is under the microscope.
We appreciate the position the board certainly is in. And so
Yeah.
we're working closely with Alice Paylor and our general counsel to make sure that we're operating within the confines of what we should be, and that we're using funds adequately and accurately to support student learning. And Mrs. Paylor has assured us that, at this time for us to proceed. And as we developed the transition plan and discussed it today with Mrs. Bailey and Mrs. Watley, we believe that the plan will allow us to continue to provide services to students and to teachers while working collaboratively with all stakeholders to ensure we have a robust curricula and professional development plan in place for 24-25 after the state rolls out its options for textbook adoption.
And we'll be prepared to share that widely with the entirety of the board on the 17th.
Yeah, and what I would really, advise is definitely item 9, where we're bringing in outside vendors for professional development. Or not item 9, item 9 is item 8, yeah. Because it's obviously the largest amount of money. And, with us trying to find the 19, million for the teachers' bonuses, we really need to be taking Esser totally apart and really reviewing what is truly, truly needed. So, when you say you're going to be doing professional development for a curriculum we're trying to basically walk away from, it just, I can see if it's being used for new teachers coming on, fresh out of school, because they can't get enough professional development.
Right. And I'll say, this is a multi-year contract, that this dollar amount is not a 1-year long venture. This is multi-year, and it's not specific to EL. I'll reiterate that they're about teacher habits, teacher practices, and refining delivery, more or less. It's not unique to EL. It could be used with any curriculum. That's why we consider it a win, because despite the curriculum, in spite of the curriculum, we want teachers to have solid and sound practices in their toolbox.
Like I said, Ms. Simmons, my job is just to look at the money and try to figure it out and
Right.
give some friendly advice. Darren, do you have anything to add
Well,
after
no,
my diatribe?
That's where I really wanted to get to, that we will be able to use this even after, through the transition year, and just reiterate, this is our transition year. We need to keep that comprehensive curriculum throughout the district so our students can get the best education and our teachers can get the best professional development. But we will still be able, and she just reiterated it for me, but we'll still be able to use this leading educators following this upcoming year. It will help our teachers after we come on with a new curriculum as well, moving forward over the next few years. So how long is the multi-year? Is it 2 or 3?
This is a 2-year agreement. Mr. Calhoun, thank you.
Yeah.
And why isn't it not just 1 year?
Because we want to have the benefit of that consistency. So when we onboard, as we've experienced this year, anytime we adopt new curricula, it's a challenge. And we value the support that leading educators have been able to provide over the last couple of years. And so we want to have the benefit of that consistency, so that there's continuity of services in terms of teacher habits and teacher practices, regardless of the title of the curriculum materials. And so it's not unusual for us to work with companies and vendors to have multi-year contracts for that very reason. It does a couple of things. It guarantees, for us, that the cost won't be inflated unreasonably, and our practitioners build relationships with the folks. They are receptive to the information when they know what to expect. So that's what leading educators will bring to the table.
And my other question, as they're moving forward with the new curriculum selection for next year, they will be alongside us to understand, like, all right, this is where we need to move forward to, and restructure their professional development in that way. So that way we getting ahead of the ball trying to do this right now.
I believe so. We believe that that's prudent to work with our partners in a comprehensive way. Everybody's clear on where we stand. We haven't broadly announced to the greater community that this is a transition year, but that's the purpose and the intent of our presentation. We're planning for the 17th to make it known to everyone that we see the 2023-2024 year as a transition. We found great benefit with EL. The results are undeniable, and we can we intend to continue that. What I would hate to see is to be sitting in this seat a year from now and our data points have regressed because we haven't been responsible in how we address this matter of what curricular, when to onboard it, and how we work with our teachers and staff. Mr. Gallion, were you about to?
Yes. Bobrowski, can I speak? So I
Please.
heard the plan. I heard the plan today, and I will assure you that the team has put a lot of thought into this transition and making sure that it's, one, the least disruptive to our students, and two, that we continue to build on the best of the professional development that teachers have been learning for the last year or so. And so they continue that. And like Ms. Simmons said, they can actually apply those skills to any curriculum, which is beneficial to all of our students.
Well, I think the key information that's been derived today is the rollout on July 17th, because I think what needs to get started as quickly as possible is the parent and the teacher involvement in this whole process, so that, it's, we know when 2024 or whenever this rollout is, that there's been full transparency, full involvement, and just makes our life so much easier. Any further questions from the committee? Hearing none, I'd like a motion to move the approved list of contracts greater than 250,000 as laid out in item 2B through June 21st, 23 to the full board for consideration. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion, all against? Hearing none, the motion proceeds, passes, and we move on. To item 2C, the second reading of the FY24 budget.
Thank you.
Ms. Carlin.
Thank you. So just to bring everybody up to speed, the board adopted the first reading on June 20th. And so we have started working and reconciled the second reading of the budget. However, there were a few changes that have been made that we wanted to bring to the committee as well as to the board. The second reading budget that has been developed is based upon the 8.3 millage increase, and we'll go through all the different items that were kept in the budget. But for now, one of the things we recently found out in the last few days was our economic rebates that we had budgeted for 23 and for FY24 were higher than what they're coming in. So we wanted to adjust that revenue line item correctly for local tax revenues by approximately $1.1 million. And so that is built into this second reading. Something else that came to light on the expenditure side was we met with two different schools that needed additional support for their transient enrollment. What that means is there's a time between after their 10-day count and before their 45-day count where there's an influx of students. And so what we wanted to do was go ahead and give those schools their PCN number so they could go ahead and advertise for those teaching positions and other positions needed. That total cost on that was $884,000. And then a second line item was the superintendent transition related increases. And that just includes our new chief administrative officer position, as well as the difference in what we budgeted for the superintendent fringe package, a salary and fringe package versus what the actual amount came in to be. And that total amount was $435,000. And then another thing that changed was our strategies to balance. We ended up using an additional $216,000 in fund balance to make up the difference of the revenues versus the expenditures. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. That will be it's something that you'll see on the next few slides as an increase to our second reading of budget. And so, thanks, Maggie. And so what we did is the first column.
Can I just ask,
Sure,
Ms.
sure.
Carlin, how do you want to handle this? You want to do the whole presentation? We'll come back and
I
ask
don't have
questions.
to. What I can do is just talk about what changed like I just did, and the rest of it.
Any comments from the committee on how you'd like to, Ms. Carlin, to proceed on this?
I'll say, let's go through the whole presentation and then, as we write our questions
agree.
down that way.
All right,
Thank
thank you. So the first block where it says 8.3 mil increase, the board adoption, June 20th. What the board actually approved on June 20th versus the changes that have been made. The first thing that we will notice on the the line that says FY 2024 projected revenue, that number has gone from 697.7 million to 698.8 million. And that's where the $1.1 million increase comes into play for the economic rebates. And the same for the funds available for allocation. That number, the change in that is the 1.1 million. The required increases are the same from the budget scenario, the 8.3 mil increase for the board adoption versus the 8.3 mil increase for the changes. We were able to keep the school data review recommendations. Those have not changed. The learning services expansions are still the same, as well as the net positions gained due to projected enrollment. One of the areas that did change is under other considerations. We're still keeping in the 2.5% cost of living adjustment for non-teachers in their step. But if you look further down, you'll see two new line items that talk about the staff support for transient enrollment and the superintendent transition related costs, which I just covered. And so that the difference between the other considerations originally was 10 million, and now it's 11.3 million. And the difference is the 1.3 million in expenditures for those two line items we just talked about. So the total 24 expenditure request additions, that increased by 1.3 million, as well as the projected additional funds available for 24. That's the $1.1 million difference where the revenues come into play. And so the remaining needed to balance the difference between the June 20th board approved first reading and then this new one is the $216,000 that we'll need in fund balance. And so the next section, strategies to balance. The only thing that changed on that was the elimination of the departmental positions. We were able to reduce that number down to 3.2 million. And that included approximately 37 positions. These are the positions that have been vacant for several months, several years that we eliminated. And then the other line item that changed was the use of fund balance for additional FY23 savings. That went from 5.3 million to 5.7 million. And then the use of fund balance went from 4.6 or 4.7 million to just a little over 6 million. But overall, the difference was $216,000. And so here again, our second reading budget, it does balance. And then on the next slide where we break out our fund balance projection, I could go through all this, but what we wanted to show is with the second reading in the last column that's highlighted in yellow, the projected fund balance at June 30th, 2024 is 145.2 million. And what we wanted to show is that we are still within our fund balance policy we are still maintaining our fund balance policy by staying above the 143.6 million. And so the next slide. So this is the information that was presented in our public hearing ad that was in the Post and Courier on June 11th. And it also appeared in the Coastal Chronicle on June 29th. And it's just showing the FY23 projected revenues versus FY24 projected revenues and the amount of change. And then the same with the expenditures from year to year. And so our proposed FY24 millage for general operating is 8.3 mils. And then the next slide is for our debt service. Same thing, we're showing our FY23 projected revenues and expenditures versus FY24 projected revenues and expenditures. However, on this particular millage, we are decreasing by 2 mils. And so the overall debt service millage will go from 28 to 26 mils. And then the next slide just shows our combined proposed millage rates, which is a total combined of 164.3. And then the next few slides, we've seen these many times. I can go through them again, but it's basically just showing the impact to taxpayers using the 8.3 mil increase. We've got several scenarios here, one with a 7.1 mil increase and the 2 mil decrease, as well as using an 8.3 mil increase and or a 9.8 mil increase. And then recommended next steps. Today in Audit Finance Committee, we are hopeful that the second reading of this budget will be passed and get a committee vote. And I've still kept on here if we need for some reason next week, a special called board meeting to discuss anything that was changed or spoken about in the second reading today. And then, of course, we have our public hearing next Wednesday, and as well as our July 17th date for the board adoption of the second reading. I did want to let you know the second reading is at the print shop right now and will be delivered to all of the board members at their home residence on Monday. And we will, same for the Audit and Finance Committee, we'll get those to y'all and cabinet members. And if we don't have any questions on the general fund, we do have a couple of changes on the capital side that we wanted to share just for transparency reasons.
Yeah, I think let's do the general fund first and then we'll.
Sure. Okay.
I know I saw a lot of changes in the capital fund. So I did give a heads up that there would be a lot of questions. So let's just do the general fund first.
Okay, sure.
Any questions from the committee from Ms. Carlin?
I have a couple of questions. First, just to clarify, just so I think I know the answers to these, but I want to make sure I understand. Can you remind us what's in this and what's out as it relates to the $5,000 across the board bump bonus, and as well as where did we get to in terms of percentage target on the non-teacher staff? Those three items.
Okay, yes. So for the teachers, this includes a step, this includes a step plus a $5,000 increase per step or per grade per step across every single teacher salary schedule that goes out to 40 steps. The bonus is being paid out of Esser 3 funding, so it's a separate, no, it's not part of this budget at all.
Right.
And then for non-teachers, this includes a step plus a 2.5% cost of living adjustment.
So where does that get us relative to our target?
Bill is not here, and I am not 100% sure, but I can find out and follow up with you.
So then, not
Sure.
Thank you. The 2.5 and the COLA and the step.
Can you introduce yourself and hold you to protocol and explain what you're doing?
Sure. I'm Carol Temple. I am the District 9 Board of Trustees member. So I have been thinking about this non-teacher part, the 2.5 and the COLA and the step increase, and what that means to our non-teachers. And I've received several emails with people raising concerns about that. And so the question that came to mind for me was, where did this 2.5 come from? How is this calculated and so on? So here's what I learned. I learned that in 2014, there was a market study done for non-classified people. And in 2014, we had some figures. So that's 11 years ago. And I looked at the history of how we've been funding our non-classified people. And sometimes we reach 97%, sometimes we reach 92%, sometimes we reach 0%. And so the question for me came, well, what would it mean to this budget to show support of our non-classified people and to address the same kinds of salary concerns that they have that our teachers are having. And so I asked the question then, what would it cost to fund 100%? What would it say to our non-teachers in terms of support? So I received this email from Bill. I think it answers your question. The
And
cost,
Bill who?
Bill Brigman. The cost to get to 100% for non-teachers is $10,971,122. So $10.9 million. There is a $5.9 million increase in the current budget. And so we would need another 5 million to get to the proposed 100%. That would then mean that it would be a 5.5 COLA versus the current 2.5 COLA. I myself am a real advocate for our non-classified or non-teacher support that is in our classrooms. We have teacher assistants who are there when the teacher isn't there. They get less money than the substitute who is in their classroom. They do amazing things to support our students, our special education students. And so I would like for us to really consider, since this is the appropriate time in the budget, to look at what would it cost us to provide 100% support through the COLA to our non-teacher staff. Thank you.
So that answers the question. Thank you.
You asked.
My next comment.
Our chair has said, did I say what we should go for the 5.5% COLA increase so that we get to 100% of the market.
So that also leads to, well, leads to discussion of my next comment, which is not a surprise probably, but very much appreciate the hard work and effort that goes into this. And I understand the rock and the hard place between which we're stuck. And not to quibble, but when we say this is how we balance, from my perspective, we're not balancing because we're taking our fund balance down by 14 million. We're taking it down by 21 million from where it would have been, but we're taking it down by 14 million from what it actually was. So we're hitting our fund balance by 9% year over year. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but back to the Moody's report, which is not, it's an external group that's very, very objective. They're just comparing us to other financial districts. And the median fund balance in our credit category is 27%. And we were at 15%. They also highlight that we are, well, first of all, the fund balance ratio is 20% of their scoring metric. So it's one of the most significant factors in their assessment. And it's one of the things they note that could lead to a downgrade down the future. Now, I'm not trying to be alarmist, and I don't think it's happening next year, but this type of action is the type of action that could, and in my opinion, would lead to a downgrade in some period of time if we adopt budgets like this. So I am personally 100% in support of getting to 100% of market on the non-teacher staff. And I'm 100% in support of the increases to teacher compensation because we've seen in the data our difficulty in retaining teachers, and we know it anecdotally as well. But I think we're not making the hard decision here in that we're wanting to increase comp and we're not running to raise the millage enough to be in line with each other. And so I had hoped when we left this last meeting that we would back solve into what's the appropriate compensation levels for our people and then adjust the millage to have a neutral fund balance impact. And so I would, again, encourage us to pursue that path versus a millage that's doesn't keep our fund balance whole.
Yeah, and really to counter, and this is, one of the reasons I'm really happy that Dr. Gallion is present, to hear this. One of the key things when we went through this whole superintendent search, we went through listening to what, the transparency arguments, listening to what the teachers felt, and more importantly, listening to what our constituents said. And I agree with them. You still have not proven to me that we have hit I don't know how to say this, but a lean fighting machine. I know we're all doing great jobs. I know the teachers on the ground are really doing a great job, but I'm considered from that level up to the superintendent that there's just so much that we have not reviewed for what is relevant, what is doing a good job, and what's not a good job. And we just haven't done that yet. And that was one of the things that was really stressed when we did our interviews, looking at a reorg chart and really trying to figure this system out where we could save, because it's the higher paying salaries. Then, I know the argument was made, 75 Calhoun only represents 10% of our budget. But your point's well taken. We are overspending every year. We are not balancing a budget because we're using our balance funds. So I'm really hesitant to go any further with any further expenditures until we get this straight. And that's why I think this year will be a really banner year, because we'll start off in September, taking each department apart and looking at exactly what it's costing us to see if we can save what we can save, because we didn't do that. We didn't have that opportunity. We inherited what this was. So, I think a lot of the committee meetings, we're going to try to beat that up, to really look at it. So I appreciate all the hard work. I think the reporting study, it's like, when we start going back to questions, what were the two schools that we had the transition issues on?
North Charleston High School and Stall High School.
Yeah, expected. So it's well worth it. So we're really just making sure that we're prepared when they get the additional students. So that's good. Yeah, because it's like looking at the assistant principals. I still struggle with that, adding an assistant principal to a school that's only got 100 students or 200 students. So, that's one of the things I want Dr. Gallion really to look at when he does his reorg and trying to figure out what is most efficient, in the use of some of these positions that we may or may not fund it. I mean, we all have to understand this is a projected budget. It's not written in stone. In January, when we look at this, number is going to be changing. Everything's to be looking at, but it's your best guess on historical numbers, which you're far better in a position to do it than anybody else. So I appreciate the hard work you've done.
And I don't want to jump ahead, but coming up on the monthly financial report, what we budgeted, we're nowhere near. We came in higher on revenues. We came in lower on expenditures. We actually did a really good job. And we had a balanced budget to begin with. We thought we were going to use about $18 million in fund balance, and we didn't have to, but there were just so many variables at that time that we were working with. And, we did the best we could at that time.
And I know we're going to talk about this on the arbitrage, but, when you just saw what happened today with the T-bill rate, I mean, it's insane. We really, really have to be careful here going forward next year, because, the signs are not this rosy picture that everybody's looking at. Yeah, we're doing good this year, but, anybody with any sense of the market knows that this rate can't happen. And what we're seeing is it's not making sense. It's helping us, but it's a short-term fix. Anyway, as to other questions I had on the budget, I'm sorry to, I'm going to pass on. Darren, do you have any questions?
Yes. First, my first statement before I get into my questions, I think the moral of the story is we need to raise the millage. The 8.3 is not sufficient enough. We need to raise that millage. We have it available to us, and it will stop us from having to use so much of our fund balance. Let's go ahead and do it. Yeah, we have to do that. But get into my question. We're still using the Senate version, correct? Are we any closer to knowing how much we're gonna possibly be getting?
No, the the General Assembly passed a continuing resolution just like we did. And if I'm reading between the lines correctly, they will not come back to legislative session until January 2024.
Okay, that's great. That's everything we need. And that's gonna change things eventually. And like you just said, that's gonna change things in January. We may get influx of money that we can put into our fund balance and work things out from there. But but for now, we need to do something. With the Esser stabilization line, that's the 22 million, correct? Yeah, the 22.9 million, the Esser stabilization line. That has the ability to go up or go down if needed.
That is correct with board approval. It's assigned right now, so.
Right, it's all assigned, but if we say if we need to just, as we're doing the other amendments or whatnot that we have to put forward, say if we try to find 300,000 out of the Esser stabilization, so we wouldn't have to use that extra 216 out of our fund balance. It's a possibility. Not saying right now we will have to do it, but it is a possibility to do that.
Yes, it's still fund balance, but yes, sir, I see what you're asking.
Right.
What you're asking, yes.
Right. And as far, and I think this one goes for Dr. Gallion. I know we're looking at the departmental positions that were not used. We all know it's easier to rearrange a line as opposed to taking a line and trying to bring it back. With the projected positions that we're looking at cutting for the balancing, were you able to look at those positions to see, all right, maybe we need to keep one or the other?
No, not yet.
Okay. And Ms. Collins, do we have, and I guess I know Bill is not here, but do we have those list of positions that he can take a look at to make sure there's nothing in there that's critical to him that we think he would need, so we won't have to come back and try to create a new line?
Yes,
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
thank you.
I would just add one other comment. I think, Mr. Grabowski, I think your point about, exploring how can we be more efficient over the coming year, I think that's a wise endeavor. I think so. I think that period, no buts there. When we look facing just the decision about this budget, though, we have transparency into what the increases in our costs are. And when I say we, I mean the broader we, the board is kind of implicitly signing off on these increases in our costs. So I think to sign off on these increases in our costs, which I'm fully supportive of, without signing off on the corresponding revenue increase, is what directly leads to the depletion of our fund balance. And so our ability to find efficiencies in the future is going to be necessary, because some of the increases in staff comp are going to have an increasing effect on future budgets. So our expenses are going to be this is just this year, we're going to have a ripple effect in future years, as well as the fact that the bonus that we're applying this year, if we don't find a way to work that into the compensation schedule in future years, it's going to have a demotivating, de-incentivizing impact on our teachers. So we've already got kind of an inherent increase in the cost structure in future years. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. We can and should work towards efficiencies in the future years. But again, I come back to, I think it's not responsible for us to approve a budget that depletes our fund balance. But
the other thing on this sustaining the Esser stabilization, maybe I'm a little confused on this. If we're still working with Esser 3 up until next September, and hopefully we can go through a complete audit of this and figure out where we can save money and look at it, why do we need the 22 million? I mean, if we're already operating under money that we have, we've already allocated Esser 2 and Esser 1. I mean, are we talking about stabilizing Esser 2 and 1 programs? Because Esser 3 programs are already in place.
This is mostly for Esser 3. At the time, we were just planning ahead and trying to.
It's to continue successful programs to the end of it.
But Esser 3 ends in September, and it's going to be ending on the 24-25 budget, not on the 23-24 budget. So you're restricting it. You're putting it like in a savings account. Any other, Ms. Carla? I'm just looking at the and I know we're only talking about increasing the usage by only 200,000, but then when I look at the number, where's the $6 million number? Oh, here it is. Use of fund balance. One was 4,690,000, and I think you said it. And the other one was $6,014,000. And that's the use of fund balance. So how are we only spending 216?
Well, if you look at the elimination of departmental budgets, that
Right.
number went from 4.7 to 3.2, so it went down. And then the actual use of fund balance for was originally 5.3 million, and we increased that to 5.7. I see your question, but whenever I look at the overall total, we went from 28.4 million to 28.6 million. So it was about a $216,000 increase to fund balance.
That's just the change from the one that was adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
from when it was
216 is just the.
adopted, Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just confusing. You see the 5.7, and then you see the 6, right below it. So that's really the 216s right there.
No. The 216 is changed from the first column to the second column,
The total, yes.
the 28.4 in the column before it to the 28.6.
Got it.
That's the 216. So that's just how much has changed since the last time we saw this. The use of fund balance is still 11.7.
11.7, yeah.
And that includes some of these potential items.
Mhm.
Any further questions from the committee? Go ahead, Dr. Kimball.
Just one more thing, because I proposed something. So what I would really like to see is if we could get to the 100% of market value for our non-teaching staff, what would that millage or budget look like? And it's a millage change, I would suspect, because I think we've digested the budget and have tried to justify it as much as possible. So I think for us to consider this, we need another set of figures to show what would the millage increase be in order to say to our non-teaching staff, we want to support you 100%.
I've actually already calculated it, and it would be 1.75 mil increase.
$5 million roughly.
5.2, 5.3.
5.3. Yeah, I'm not inclined to make that recommendation. I think we've worked too hard to get to this point. We've already, been out in the pushing hard. I think our biggest battle right now is to get the 5 million for not the 5 million, the 19 million for the teachers on the Esser. So I'm not inclined to start spending more money, after 2 months of fighting to get where we are. We're not fighting, but working together to get where we are. So, to the other committee members, I think we need to hold tight on this, and then we've really got to work hard starting in September to start making this, administration much more efficient. Or and I may be wrong, we may be under efficient. But the reliance on vendors it just upsets me dearly that we rely so heavily on vendors. I know they're needed on certain parts, but when I look at Esser, I look at the travel expense, and we'll talk about this later on. It makes me sick. It's just wrong to me. But I'm only a board member, so I'm not the experts, and the answers. So you always make me feel a lot better. So anyway, with that being said, any other further questions from the committee on the general operation fund? So what I'd like to do is make a motion to forward to the board.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I would really, I think we need to go back to the board with that higher millage. We are really pushing it close, particularly with our Moody's report. We are really pushing it close with this. And I guess I can ask Ms. Carlin, what's the best case scenario in January and the worst case scenario in January when they pass a new budget, if they pass a new budget in January?
So the worst case scenario was if they go back to the House version, which would bring our state revenues back down 2.2 million. The best case scenario is either it stays at the Senate version and we move forward as is, or they come back and they actually add additional money to the South Carolina Department of Education budget. I'm not hearing from my associates at the State Department that that is an option, but it could happen.
So we need to save ourselves, and I understand what you're saying, Keith, but I really got to go with the committee on this. We need to save ourselves on this end and just go ahead and try to get the board to push for this higher millage. This is the finance committee for a reason, and they mean what they say when they say we need to raise this millage to justify what we're spending. And I'm would love to hear from other committee members of what you actually think, but I think we need to save ourselves on the front end instead of trying to fix it later.
I mean, I agree with you, Mr. Calhoun, that that the millage should go up just so we do have what Mr. Griffith said, and that's a balanced budget, that we're not taking money from one pot, because if things start going downhill, it's going to be harder to replace that fund balance money back in there. And, and I agree that, putting off on the non-teachers, isn't the best, because I listen, to the technology side, because we lose a lot of employees that they're non-teachers because we train them and then they go to hire in commercial. They can get a better job over there. But, teachers are our main employees, and that's what we're here to do, is to teach the students. The money should more go towards the teachers. And, I agree that, we should push for a higher millage, so it does become a true balanced budget. So we're not taking money from one pot to balance it on the other side.
I was just going to add to the Kent stole everything I was going to say. So you put the thought, yeah, it must be reading my mind. And it sounds like I've got a lot of agreement here as well. I think I'm in agreement with everyone. Increase pay as much as we can on it. As long as we're operating under the continued constraints of 388, Act 388. We've heard comments in the past throughout the years of audit and finance that legislative representatives have come back and said, until you maximize what you can tax, don't complain about it. I'm paraphrasing, and that's probably not the best way to say it, but I'm in agreement as well too. Probably if we can look at a higher millage rate increase, well, it's never popular, taxes or not. I think it is a prudent and reasonable thing to look at. So we are not, and I think you used a great term there, Stephen, but robbing Peter to pay Paul, or moving from one place to another, but within reason as well too. I don't want to delay anything further on it, but I think it is a very valid one. And it's something we should consider.
So as I hear it from the committee, I think what we need to ask Ms. Carlin to do is that we keep the 8.3 moving forward, because we've got all the work done. I really hate to ask you to run another model, but it seems like you're going to when I'm listening to the committee members, you're going to need to have another model that would cover. And as I understand it, with committee members, we're really looking to get the 100% COLA increase for the non-certified teachers. So I think that's, you're going to have to look at what type of millage rate that would require for that. Because that's really the only additional costs that we're talking about, if I'm hearing what the committee's saying or recommending.
Well, I think we're also talking about a millage increase to cover the fund balance draw to
You're talking 16 million.
start with the 13.7 that we're taking it down from last year to this year in this budget. That'd be the first thing. If it was me, the first thing I would do is increase the millage to make that 0, to keep our fund balance exactly where it was. I mean, remember, the report doesn't, we're already at a low point. We really shouldn't be going down from here. And if even holding the fund balance flat, that percentage is going to get worse because the revenues are going up. So as a percentage, we're already going to get it worse if we just hold fund balance even. And I just don't think we can do worse than that, in my opinion.
Is I think going back to past conversation, each point on the millage is about $30 million.
3 million.
3 million. So what you're now asking is for almost a 4 to 5 point on top of the 8. So we're looking at and we're maxed out at 15
I would take
by law.
11.7 million, which is the.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think what we've got to do is you've got to just take these back and actually figure out what you're looking. Then we take to the board the 8.3 or the second model for consideration.
And Ms. Carlin, this wasn't start a second reading of the budget, would it?
No, sir.
Yeah.
And if it's the board's choice, I mean, we did put a date on here, the week of July 10th for a special called meeting if it was needed, just in case something like this happened. Or we can stay with the 17th, I believe it is.
Because a special called meeting has to take into whatever we're going to put out to the public.
Well, that was my next question is yes, the public hearing is on next Wednesday, and it was our plan to move forward with the 8.3. So. Yeah.
Can you articulate that? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Griffin. I do believe that whatever decision you make here today would impact the public hearing next week. So if you make a different recommendation, I'm certainly no expert, but I do believe the public is supposed to be well informed of the intent prior to the public meeting. My apologies.
That's okay. Yeah.
The timing for this discussion is just not. I mean, that's why I think unfortunately, the 8.3 is something that the board is going to approve and is going to move forward. We're not, the public's looking for it, and we're not coming with this radical change. Going up to 11, 12, and up into that range where we're pushing the cap. I just think we can do a better job next year and in the reorg and really looking things. I mean, but I'm not, this sounds like the committee, this is a democracy. This is why we have a committee, and your opinions are all, are well valued and respected. So if it's committee's general, I'm one voice, maybe the chairman, but I'm just the moderator. But nevertheless, I think, Ms. Carlin, I think what you would probably have to do in the next day or two is really, try to come up with a model. And then, I would assume just try to, because we're going to have a special meeting. And then it really goes back. You've already got it out to the printers, but it's how to handle the public, because we do not want to stop that, so that you can get that within, so we can have the final reading on the 17th. Welcome to South Carolina.
Okay. Yes, sir. I will do that.
Is that, I mean, what do you?
Well, you have a tentative meeting already on the docket for
For the board?
the board.
No, we just put it on here, just as a, placeholder in case we needed it.
So you could call it if you needed to.
Yeah.
Right. And that would potentially put off the 12th and 17th dates. But presumably I know I'm underappreciating the magnitude of the effort, but I'm assuming it would be a couple of days, we're only talking about a couple of days from today even.
Yes.
And as far as running a model, it seems, not to minimize the work, because I know it's a ton of work, but is it not as simple as taking the decline in the, sorry, can't we just take the decline in the fund balance as projected, divide that by our millage value, and that gives us the number of millages that we need to add to the 8 point?
Yes. Yes, I could do that tomorrow. Mhm.
And then that way I can talk to the chairman about the special meeting. So I think that if you could, confirm that with me tomorrow, then I'll talk to the chairman, and then we'll have time. We can schedule the meeting by at least Tuesday, or if not Monday, because we'll still have 24 hours if we make the decision tomorrow.
And is it the fact that it's changed is what requires the additional board meeting? Or if we met again in that timeframe, would that help the process in any way? No.
No, I've got to have board approval.
So you have to have board approval either way.
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I thought that the special meeting was almost required for you to go to the public, that you needed it to be set in stone as to what we're representing to the public.
Yes.
And I promise you, Ms. Carlin, this will not happen again next year. We will be so much more efficient and ahead of this.
Sorry, Trina's trying to. If this quagmire is just possibly one item of trying to make it more interesting for our other.
I'm sorry, we can't hear on the Zoom.
She asked, Mr. Calhoun, Chair McKinney asked whether this quagmire was a result of the desire to raise non-certified.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. McKinney.
No, I like your accent better.
Yeah, I would.
Sure I do, Ms. McKinney.
Right, I would say no, Ms. McKinney, because we're really looking at the fund balance and us losing that fund balance right now, and that's going to put us in a bad position when we get rated again.
Right, right. And
So not more so about the 5 point, which we all agree with Dr. Temple, but this is more so that fund balance dropping down. On top of that extra 216,000 we have to use out of it. Now we're getting in a very dangerous place of that 140, of hitting that 144 mark. Because say if something crazy happens next year, and we have to spend another $5, $6, $7 million, we're really gonna get hit hard. So yeah, this is more so about trying to protect our fund balance and staying in a good place.
yes, and I understand the importance of that. Did we not realize that importance when we said, let's look at the 8.3?
Yeah,
Ms. Carlin and her staff to give us the facts on that.
we did.
I have a problem with the needle constantly moving.
Well, that's the thing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I feel like we have got some really difficult decisions to make. And I do not feel like constantly raising millage makes us look at efficiency. And I have an issue with that. And I'm just very concerned with us constantly moving the needle on the budget. And I also have concern that you would get a board vote to change now. I don't know how people would vote, but I have a concern.
Yeah, and I hear you. I think we did, when the committee last month, when we actually put forward our recommendation, we accounted for all of this. And then when we accounted for all of this, and then we, at the board meeting, we went back down to the 8.3. So on the committee side, we actually looked at it and said, all right, we need to take this into account. At the board meeting, we took it back down to 8.3. So we did look at the fund balance as far as the committee being concerned. The millage is there for us to use, and I think we have to use it so we can stay in a decent place. What you got, Mr. Brodsky?
I also think that our community will honor us with grace. We've all been trying to work out this budget, trying to understand this budget, asking the questions over and over, trying to build understanding. And I have to say that until I started receiving some emails and thought a little bit more deeply about the 2.5 and the COLA, what did that mean? And as I researched the situation, it seems to me, if I had known about the fact that we were only funding our employees at 97% since 2014, and sometimes not even that amount, this would have been of deep concern. But now that we know it, we have to do right.
Yeah, and to Mr. Calhoun's defense, we did consider the 10.3. I mean, there was no question we were looking at the 10.3, but we were also looking at serious, restrictions on staffing and becoming much more efficient. And I have to agree. I mean, I'm not happy with the way the fund balance is being used. I'm not happy at all that we're having the Esser, that 22 million set aside on Esser. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. If we were doing our job correctly, this would not have come up. And I know this is going to be the biggest concern as we move forward. And this is why we're going to be asking an awful lot of people to look at the Esser funding, independent auditors, everything, because this is where we're getting into trouble. And that's what concerns me more about this fund balance is the effect that Esser is going to have on, as we wind down. I have to agree with Ms. McKinney. I don't like moving the bar at all. I think this is the wrong time to do it. We're just too far down the road. I think we need to just tighten the belts and do a really good job. This is just a budget. These are numbers and these are projections. But when I look at the future uses and when we get to capital projects, I mean, I really start scratching my head because I know we're starting to come off of some of these, tax revenues, sales tax revenues. But I'm still going to, my recommendation would be stay on the 8.3 where we are, and then just tighten our belts, a lot, to make sure that we don't get to the fund balance. But with that being said, I am open for, other motions, and it, like I said, Ms. Carlin, if you want, I think it probably would be wise, just so that we have it, because we have discussed it, and then the committee as a majority has raised its concern, that we look at running one more model to have it for presentation. But I think we're going to need a board meeting anyway, because this question has been raised up. And it is a board approval as to how they want to go, so that when you do go to the public, we're firm. And then the 17th is not as difficult as we hope it's not to be. Anybody on the committee object to that? Darren, you fine with that?
Fine with that.
Well, what I'm proposing to do is to make a motion that we move forward with this, but that we also ask Ms. Carlin to raise, to present to the board at that meeting, another model, taking into concern the COLA and the fund balance.
And so what we'll end up doing is just getting information from the different committee members or how they feel about the different model, as opposed to having a full meeting.
I don't think it'd go to the committee. I think it just goes straight to the board. The committee's recommendation is that we would move forward with this model and the additional model for consideration by the board.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I don't want to, delay the process any longer. I think
yeah.
the committee has made its point. Well spoken.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Mrs. Carlin, the policy, does it require the second reading to go through the Audit and Finance Committee, however? Can we confirm that?
That's what this is.
Second reading.
Yeah.
But do you need a specific
you need-
approval from
Cor-
us?
Correct. I think I don't want to overstep, but I also want to make sure this group does what it needs to do in preparation. So I'll revisit that policy really quickly.
So we don't know yet if we need an approval from this committee.
I just want to make sure we don't violate policy. Yes, sir,
Yeah.
Mr. Griffin, I appreciate that. Yes, sir.
No, she brings up a valid point. Yeah, we do need approval today from Audit and Finance Committee to move forward.
My expertise certainly is not in as a CFO, but I will
Thank you,
definitely.
Anita.
I don't see why, because, that's how we got to the first reading. We came in with models, the board was, because this is a committee recommendation to look at it.
But we had made.
But we don't have any documentation at all. So there's no way we can sit here and vote and say, yes, we're going to raise the millage rate. I mean,
No, sir.
that's definitely not.
I just think the
kosher.
motion to move it forward to the board, I just want to make sure it does not have to filter through the Audit and Finance Committee. Just pardon me a second.
Because I would think that's what we just did.
At the last meeting, we actually made a recommendation for a specific
10.3, right?
budget. And as far as the needle being moved, that's not the budget that came back.
That's
Right.
correct. It got voted. The agreement was 8.3, and then we came back with these numbers. So the 10.3 has already been presented to the board once, was rejected, came back down to the 8.3.
Right.
So I really changing to go to the chairman's position. I don't think this is the time to be changing what we've already gone up and back forth on. I understand what the committee's saying. I think the board's already shown
I'm presuming the board can approve a budget even if the audit.
Absolutely. We're just recommending. And whatever goes to the board is what board's going to approve. So that's why I'm saying it. That's why I was trying to get Darren to, say, let's propose moving this forward, but have a model just in case that the board, though you've got some documentation, because we don't have documentation right now.
And where I guess I'm going respectfully is, I think we should, even if the board has not approved what we presented, still approve what we think is financially prudent, even if the board elects not to do it. I don't think we should approve something we think is imprudent just because we believe the board will approve that. Right.
And the second thing is, really all we've done is identified we've identified two areas of concerns. One's raising the COLA up and is the use of funds. I mean, it's not like we're changing the whole budget. We're asking it to be solely limited to covering those two expenses. So I think that's easily discussed.
So here's one question about the Esser in this. I think more information about that would help. For example, if some of that funding is because we previously improved the air quality in schools or replaced back carpeting or did HVAC systems, those aren't going to have to be done again. If there are programs that help students catch up, those students are now caught up. We might not need as many of those programs. So my question is, are we very specific on that 22, was it 22 million for the Esser? How specific are we being? Is that overestimating, underestimating, or is it right on the penny? And my other thought about my concern about the needle moving is when this came from finance to the board previously, we were more focused on the 7.1 and was it 11.4 10, and the board pretty much rejected the 10 and we did the 8.3 as a compromise. And so that's one of my concerns that there might not be a willingness to increase above that 8.3.
And I agree. I mean, but also acknowledging what the committee has discussed today, I don't think it's, but I have to agree with Ms. McKinney. I think the board really, and that's why we focused on the 8.3, and we were really looking today to address so that we didn't have any changes and we could go to the public. But now we're asking for a pretty radical change, and it'd be nice to have the documentation to support. It doesn't sound like a radical change, but it's 12 additional $1 million of expenditures. Not to say it's not for a good cause.
So I'm looking at our policy for the budget.
And these are
adoption.
expenditures that continue.
Yes, sir. And the only thing that we have to do is advertise 15 days in advance about the public hearing. So based upon the policy I'm reading on the budget. And we've already done that.
Yes,
So
we don't need another audit and finance meeting. We just need to the board has to approve whatever the public's going to be seeing. So that can be easily held by a special meeting. So I think we go back, Darren, to just saying that we're going to today push this forward, ask Ms. Carlin to run the second model to address the concerns that were raised by the committee. And, then we'll call a special meeting if we have to, so that they can go public. And is this going to, how difficult is this going to make it on you if we have this meeting on Monday? Because I would assume that's when you would want to do it. So if we would have to notify you by, if we do it Monday afternoon, we'd have to notify you by tomorrow morning.
because don't we have to advertise the agenda, the agenda 24 hours in advance?
Unless
for
somebody
board
comes in
meeting?
and posts it we can post it on Saturday, but somebody has to come in and put it on the bulletin board.
So Mr. Korowski, might I respectfully ask that, can we move on to the next agenda item and let me step outside and confer with Mrs. Sizzler? I think because this has been published for Wednesday, the public hearing, that what's been published really has to go forward in the public hearing, but I just want to confer privately with Mrs. Sizzler for a second. And could we maybe move on to the next item?
I would like to talk to Mr. Bowery too.
If you, well, and I think that Mr. Borelli is long overdue to explain tonight. And I'll step right back in. Pardon my ignorance.
So we'll come back and vote on,
We're going to temporarily pause this discussion, and then we'll move on to item
3A.
Yeah, 3A, thank you, which is the monthly capital project report. No, didn't we split? Wait a minute. No, we split the capital projects from the general operating funds. So we haven't really discussed we're still on, Darren.
Yeah,
2C.
you're right.
We have to do the second part of 2C.
Mhm.
Maggie, in board docs, there's that attachment okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, thank you. Joyce.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by presenting the capital projects 5-year plan. Thank you, Maggie, for that. In the center is the highlighted yellow area, which is fiscal year 24. And I know about a month ago, I did a little brief background of the capital program. Would anyone like me to explain capital funds versus kind of GOF in our programs? All set? Okay, thank you. So just wanted to go down the revenue columns. And we have an estimated fund balance, which comes forward Where the capital funds differentiate between the operating funds is these are multi-year funds. So they continue past 6/30 of every year. The second line item is the bridge funding for this 2017 through 2022 program. As you see, there is an amount of a negative 65 million in fiscal year 23 and 0 in fiscal year 24. That is because in fiscal year 23, we paid off the last bond anticipation note for the bridge funding for that program. And that is paid out of the sales tax collections, not a general operating fund. Next is the 1 cent sales tax 2017 through 2022 program. All of our revenues have been received for that program. So therefore, we do not have any future years of those revenues. Next is the 2023 through 2028 revenues. This is for our bridge funding. And we use bridge funding. We borrow bond anticipation notes, and we work closely with our financial firm, PFM, to advise us based on cost curves for the program of when we might need additional funding. We might have a pinch point that we need to cover because our revenues come in on a monthly basis. So we're not getting everything for obviously the 6 years at once. So these are kind of interim bridge funding, as it's called. And again, we will borrow throughout the program. We are borrowing 40 million in 2024, and we will pay that back like we did the 17 through 22 program with the sales tax revenues collected. The 2023 through 2028 revenues, those projections are provided to us from PFM, our financial advisors, who are looking at their financial model, what is going on in the market, what revenues we're receiving. And I provide them with information on a monthly basis, so that is current. Next item is long-term debt program. The board had approved a few projects, which I have below in the description, that were on the sales tax 2023 through 2028 referendum, but they were below the line that we could fund the projects with using the sales tax collections. So in 2021, the board approved to move Morningside Middle School, Deer Park Middle School, AC Cochran Elementary School, and Midland Park land to be funded with long-term debt. So that will be borrowing long-term debt bonds. And the goal of the district is to be completely debt-free, by 2032. So when we borrow these funds for the $99.5 million total, those bonds and that borrowing will mirror up with our other long-term debt, so that by 2032, the district will be debt-free. We're in the process of seeing when and how much that borrowing will be. We're working with the financial advisors right now. So you will see something coming forth in a few months. And our last category on revenues is the fixed cost of ownership. This is also an annual bond anticipation note. We bring the funding document to you in February as the board to approve. And Mr. Barowie brings a program list with all the details of the projects. And those are approved at the same time. And then we can carry forward with those. And again, with us not being on a 6/30 revenue source like GOF, we actually receive those funds in May of every year when the bonds close. Any questions on revenues thus far?
Other than it's going down. But, I mean, and I think when we'll get to the expenditures, you know, and I'm sure Mr. Baroli's going to come up with some wonderful ideas on how to be looking ahead. I know we're trying to get to the debt-free side of it. But at the same time, you know, considering the growth of this county, it's going to be really important to start thinking about it now, especially when they're looking at 526 adding on, you know, to the sales tax. And it seems like everybody wants to hit the sales tax again.
I just wanted to add, which I neglected to say, with the sales tax revenues for the 23-28 program, at the time we were going on the referendum, which would have been 2020, our revenue projections were $763 million. Then the next projection we did after we started to receive cost curves from our construction management firms increased to 811 million. Our most recent projections, our financial advisors are predicting, is 995 million. So that is not reflected there. And also in the expenditures, we're still using the lower projected revenue number since this 995 million just came in. Any other revenue questions? Okay. So the expenditures are as follows. Sorry, let me get back to my notes. So the first is the phase 3, which is our 2010-2016 program. The revenues have obviously all been collected, and these are just some ancillary projects being completed. We had a D3 bus lot and some district-wide projects. So those are all under the way and should be wrapped up. For phase 4, our revenues actually came in higher for that program. So we are extending those expenditures out through 2025 that have been allocated to the various departments. Our phase 5 expenditures are based on the cost curves we received from the construction management firms. And I just wanted to point out in fiscal year 24, there's 168.9 million. This is a change from the first reading. We had originally planned to reallocate $30 million for stall, which was an increased scope. That's where I originally had it budgeted in fiscal year 25. As the board might recall, just last month at the board meeting, we brought a reallocation for that 30 million. So it has moved up to fiscal year 24 instead of 25. And all of that was vetted with our financial advisors guiding us. Next would be the debt service expenditures. These expenditures throughout the years are based on initial cost curves that we have received. And the fixed cost of ownership is 54.9 million for fiscal year 24. We basically estimate a 4% increase from year to year. Happy to answer any expenditures questions.
Any questions for the committee members? I would love to see this run out 6 years. I would just love to see 2029.
Well, that is the hope and our goal.
I know, but it just seems that, you know, with all the sales tax revenue ending at that point, and, you know, when you look at, you know, that being such a big part of what we've been doing to expand and build these beautiful schools, and just knowing, you know, really, I just can't wait to, you know, ask you about what we're going to be planning for Johns Island and Allendale. And, you know, because when you look at 2029, you know, it's just like next year that, you know, you'll be seeing it.
It actually is, and it'll be here before we know
I
it, as
know.
you're saying, because the next time we can go on the referendum. November.
That's good news to know. Thank you.
Yes, we can go on the referendum 2 years before
2
the
years out.
expiration of the program.
Well, then I highly recommend, Dr. Gallion, that we jump all over that. Be very proactive with that one. So that 2029 doesn't look like I think it's going to look.
Yeah. No, we prepare way far in advance for that. This is our third referendum program. So if there aren't any other questions on the 5-year plan, if Maggie, if you wouldn't mind just pulling up the fiscal year 24 detailed budget. This is basically all the details that is on the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan has the summaries, and the only change to this detail would be the reallocation of the 30 million for stall. And again, the detail for the expenditures would be based on cost curves that we've received.
And just for enlightenment, can you once again explain the estimated fund balance?
Well, that's basically what we are projecting to have as of 6/30/23, that we would be going into the new fiscal year 24 with.
Rolling over.
Yes, sir.
Any questions from any of the committee members? Like I said, it looks really great to 2028.
It sure does. Thank you.
It really does. Huggins, any further concerns about how we should be moving forward?
Yes, sir, if it's Ms. Carlin's permission, it appears that you might make a motion to proceed with, I've typed it out, to proceed with the public hearing at an 8.3 mil increase next Wednesday, July the 12th. But then the Audit and Finance Committee might consider recommending to staff another scenario, as you mentioned, Mr. Grabowski, to address the use of fund balance, that it be taken into consideration in a special called meeting by Audit and Finance and then by the board on July 17th.
So Audit and Finance would have to meet an hour before the board meets.
Yeah, you might, and you might consider a Zoom meeting after the public meeting next Wednesday to take a look at the scenario. Certainly, as you all know, the budget can change between the public meeting and the second reading by the board. But given our noticing of meetings, we want to be sure that the Audit and Finance has a chance to review the recommendation or what Mrs. Carlin brings and then make a recommendation to the board. I apologize, Mr. Grabowski.
Good. So, Ms. Huggins, can you read that one more time?
Sure, Mr. Calhoun. The motion might read something like, I make a motion to proceed with the public hearing at an 8.3 mil increase on July 12th. Then the Audit Finance Committee recommends another scenario to address the use of fund balance be taken into consideration in a special called meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee prior to the board consideration on July 17th.
Just so I understand that would mean, I guess, you're saying just the 8.4, or do you mean this specific budget is what you mean?
Yes, sir. Since that is the budget that's been published, it has to be the one taken into consideration Wednesday because of
So
the
it's been
time.
published as part of the notice.
Yes, sir, as part of public notice,
And you can't change those numbers without.
not without renoticing the meeting. No, sir.
We don't want to do that.
So, and there have been times, I do recall in past years where the budget has changed, and Lisa, jump in here if I'm wrong, where the budget has changed between the public hearing and the second reading of the budget by the board. Is that right, Lisa? So any scenario Mrs. Carlin might share, bring forward to you, you certainly could recommend it to the board for consideration at the second reading on the 17th.
And with that being, when's the public meeting?
Next Wednesday, the
Which is
12th.
the 15th,
The 12th.
12th?
Yes, sir.
So if we schedule an audit and finance meeting on the 13th and a board meeting to follow that, we're not loading it on Cal, which is not going to happen.
That's correct. So the Cal,
Right. And then we could have public comment. Yeah, right.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
That's not, we're not loading this on Cal.
no, sir, because
We could do it. We could
Cal-
right now. Darren, you hearing this?
the Cal and the next Board of Trustees meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 17th.
Right. So we could do this on the
Yes.
13th.
Yes,
In
sir.
the afternoon, if the committee would be amenable to that. And then we could have a special called meeting of the board to follow.
I'm sorry, I cannot do the 13th in the afternoon. I have something that I have to do that I can't cancel. I can do that morning of the 13th. I just want to put that out there.
So we can work with you, Mr. Grabowski, to schedule a time, a Zoom that might be
I
convenient.
will,
for
we'll
everyone.
work with
Yes.
the
with
chairman.
staff.
And
Yes.
so what we would do hopefully in the next day or two, advise the committee whether we're meeting. So the 14th or it's just the morning of the 13th, because we can do this by Zoom.
If we can have it done, and I need to leave by 2:00 at the latest.
Right.
Okay.
And what's more, and I also need to talk with the chairman because we need to talk to all the other board members, make sure that they're, in line with, having the second meeting. I'm pretty sure the audit and finance committee can meet your schedule and then we'll work around how to deal with the board. And I think we just got to get the documents to the audit and finance committee.
Yes, sir. I don't think a special called meeting of the board is not necessarily required prior to the 17th, but I think as an audit finance committee, you'd want to meet. Certainly, if you think this warrants a lengthy discussion by the board outside, since there is a CAL and a Board of Trustees meeting on the same day, Ms. McKinney, I believe that you could confer and we could work together, but just putting that out there.
Then let's do it this way. Let's just schedule the audit and finance meeting for Thursday morning, at 11. Does that work for everybody? Is that okay with you, Darren?
I would say 10, but that's fine.
10?
The
I'm
earlier-
fine with 10
Yeah,
too.
the earlier, the better for Ms. Carlin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can work 10. We can do it on Zoom.
Is the committee available on Thursday?
I'm available. Everybody available?
Make
Great.
myself available.
Everybody shaking their head. So the ayes have it.
Another question, sorry. Is there a way for us, or will we be permitted to make it explicit in our approval of the budget as proposed, that is approved for the purpose of facilitating the process, but that we, and maybe it's a separate motion, but I guess I would like to be on record. I think we would like the committee to be, I read the committee would like to be on record to say that an adjustment to the current budget would be prudent and appropriate to address the fund balance.
I certainly think that's an appropriate motion, Mr. Griffin, for you and your team to make on the 13th when you come together for the special call. But Lisa, would you agree with that?
So could we make it as part of the approval motion? So
Well, I think what we do is we hold off on making any motion right now. We just postpone it until the 13th.
I think they need us to approve it now.
Or do you need something approved now
I
to,
think you make the motion now to proceed with the budget
and then we'll have it.
on for the public meeting on Wednesday. And then you ask staff in the motion to create another scenario for consideration by audit and finance and then the board on the 17th. Just to make sure we've
Unless they
covered
want to have
everything.
a special.
Yes, sir. Mr. Calhoun, is that okay? Do you have any questions?
I think I'm good with that plan as long as we make it abundantly clear of what we were just talking about.
Thank you, sir. So it's your turn, Mr. Grabowski. So it's your turn, Mr. Grabowski. Does anybody not agree?
So I would like to put forth to the committee for consideration, a motion to move forward with the 8.3 millage rate budget for the public consideration on Wednesday, with staff being instructed to develop a model to cover the COLA and balance fund issues to be considered by the Audit and Finance Committee on Thursday, 10 o'clock, June 13th. July.
See what you meant.
I'd like to make the language a little more strong about, there's two different issues. There's the COLA issue and there's the fund balance issue.
That's right. That's why, did I not say it?
No, you said it, but I just want to, I'm sorry, I'm being, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I want clarity, right? And we want them to prepare those, but it's not this, in my opinion, this isn't just keep doing more analysis, because we've asked them to do 1,000 analyses. I think our recommendation, I'd like our recommendation to be clear that we approve the budget for the purpose of facilitating the process. And I would add in, however, we strongly encourage the board to revisit the millage in order to eliminate the draw on fund balance, and then potentially to consider the COLA increase.
I'll accept the friendly amendment.
Is that, I'm just trying to capture what I think is the spirit of the group. Is that?
Yes, can we get that all together in one?
Yeah, it should be all together as one. I agree with you, Darren.
I'm asking, can you say it all together so we can have a motion in front of us?
That's something to be fact of. We approved the budget for the purpose of facilitating the process of
8.3.
a board review
Yeah.
and public notice. So we're approving it subject, for the purpose of facilitating the process, period. However, we strongly suggest the board consider additional millage to eliminate the draw on fund balance, the projected draw on fund balance, and potentially to address the additional COLA for non-teacher staff.
And I think it's got to also be in there that we're instructing staff to prepare that.
And then second,
And
last sentence,
then-
yes, we asked the staff to prepare those two analyses
Right.
for the board's use. Better language than. You're in trouble if you have the numbers person trying to get the words. You need to flip that. Is
Yeah, Miss Carla, I gave you 4 more days. We gave you 4 more days.
that understandable?
Can you read it back to us, or you cannot?
We'll keep going. We'll come back to this, I think. She's trying to draft it.
Got it. Yeah, let's move. Yeah. Darren, we're going to move on so that they can type up the motion, then we'll come back to this and vote on it.
Thank you.
Sorry, she's ready. She's ready.
Oh, she's ready.
Suggest to the board, consider additional millage to eliminate the draw, potential fund balance, and potentially address the additional COLA for non-teaching staff. Staff to prepare these analyses for the board.
Identify what?
Do you need to identify which budget?
The budget that was, we're talking about the budget that was presented.
Yeah, it was the first one. It's the 8.3. Right.
So
Can you
that
get that read on the microphone? Sorry, we couldn't hear it on Zoom.
Oh,
Yeah, we may need you to come up, and I can read it. Let me just borrow your computer and read it.
You see that? Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you. Okay. I'd like to put forth to the committee for a motion to move forward with the 8.3 mil budget for public consideration with staff to develop a model to cover the COLA and fund balance concerns to be considered by concerns addressed in today's meetings to be considered by the Audit and Finance in a special called meeting on the July 13 at 10 a.m. Oh, second, the Audit and Finance will hold a specially called meeting prior to the July 17. Oh. I'm sorry. Let me start again, please. Thank God this isn't the board. I would like to put forward to the committee, a motion for staff to move forward with the 8.3 mil presentation to the public for consideration, with staff to develop a model to cover the COLA and fund balance concerns to be considered by the Audit and Finance in a special called meeting on July 13th at 10 a.m. To approve the FY24 budget with the 8.3 millage for the purpose of facilitating the process. The committee strongly suggests the board consider additional millage to eliminate the draw on fund balance and potentially address the additional COLA for non-teacher staff to prepare these analysis for the board.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Vote, please. All.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Hearing none, the motion passes. Perfect. Moving on to item 3A, the monthly capital project reports.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. I'd like to present the May capital projects report. Our 2023 through 2028 sales tax revenue collections for the month of April were 284,000 below our cash flow model projections, which are based on the most recent collections with a 2% growth over the expenditures for May are as follows. For the 2010-2016 program, $1,300. For the 2017 through 2022 building program, $2.1 million. The 2023 through 2028 building program, $6.7 million. The 2023 through 2028 building program long-term debt were $186,000. On February 27, 23, the board approved the BAN 2023 funding and the fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 24 project lists, and the program has commenced. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? As always, a wonderful report. Hearing none, we will move on to item 3D, which is the arbitrage rebates.
3B,
Or no, 3C, financial.
3B. Esser update.
I had 10,000 people at Patriots Point for 4th of July. We didn't get home till 2 o'clock. So I'm sorry. 3B, the Esser update and dashboards.
Thank you. So we're going to have Kenny Buckheister. He's our Director of Business Intelligence and Information Management. He's actually going to present to us the new Esser dashboard that we have been waiting on. Hi, Kenny.
Hi there. Thank you, Ms. Carlin. Mr. Grabowski, Mr. Calhoun, and members of the committee. I'm Kenny Buckheister. As Jackie said, I'm Director of Business Intelligence for the district. My team and I worked with Lisa Sizzler to develop the dashboard. And what I want to do today is give you a quick overview of it, just click through and show you how to kind of interact with it at a high level. And shortly after this meeting, I want to send a link to each of you and the board members so that you can access the dashboard on your own from any web browser with some instructions around how to be sure to log in with your CCSD email address rather than creating your own account with Microsoft or Power BI. But that will be included in the instructions that I send. One thing that we're working through is the community members of the committee. We also want to give access to the dashboard, but we have to work through a couple of additional steps for them, and we expect to have those completed by early next week. So community members of the board of the committee should be receiving an email from me with that link and those instructions early next week. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right, Lisa, sorry, Miss Carlin, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm so not used to calling you Miss Carlin, I apologize. This is the dashboard. Over here on the left, we have kind of the tabs that will take you to each of the 4 pages of the dashboard. There's an overall tab, an overall page, which shows spending for all 3 of the funds. There's a separate tab for each of the 3 funds. So here's Esser 1 fund. You can see everything is expensed and spent for Esser 1. In Esser 2, making great progress in my opinion on this one. We've expensed about 66 million. That's 90.1% has been expensed of Esser 2 funding. Remaining is around 4.79%. So hovering over any of these graphics will give you some additional information about the graphic. And these graphics are also clickable so that other parts of the dashboard will respond and filter down based on what you click on. So if I click on Acceleration Schools here, you can see that the rest of the dashboard shows only items that are related to Acceleration Schools and how that money is spent. That's kind of a hard one to see the real impact of the click on. It's a more complicated distribution of funds. But if I click on Finance, you can see how Esser funds are spent in finance. This is by fund. This kind of spreadsheet looking graphic. This is expense by area, by division, and of course by fund. Clicking back on the graphic that you clicked on to kind of filter things down brings you back to seeing everything as it was. You can actually get more specific. I'm not sure it necessarily applies here, but if I click here and then I want to narrow down a little bit more by clicking in this graph, it actually narrows down even further what's displaying on other parts of the graph. Not the page. I'm not sure how useful that will be for you, but it is there. So I'm going to just clear all of my clicks. And then Esser 3, similar, the navigation is the same on all of these. You can see we have 70 million expensed, 12 million encumbered, and 82 million remaining. There's a lot more that you can do with the dashboard that I won't take your time up with today. I'll put those in instructions, just kind of in a bulleted. Here's something else you can do to dig in deeper to each of these. But with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Yes, real quick, but if you click on the remaining numbers, either the percentage or the balance, will it show where it's allocated for?
So if Mr. Calhoun, in this example, so it's because this graph is showing the total amount of everything on the page. It's not currently, showing you the remaining amount. We're only able to filter down in this way by clicking into any of these other areas. Clicking into this graph or this graph, since it's not divided by any of these other divisors, if I can use that term. You can't, it doesn't do that. That's something we can look into, though, if that's going to be useful for you.
Mm-hmm.
In the spreadsheet like visual, you can see, though, for every line item, what's been budgeted, what's been expensed, what's encumbered, and what's remaining.
Mm-hmm. And by clicking in there, will it give you like a line item expense of what we were looking at?
Say a little more. I'm not quite sure I understand.
So say if you clicked inside of click the learning loss, that was 79,533. Actually, let me the school plans for 10,958,000. If you were to click on that, would it then give us somewhere where we can look at what each thing was allocated for?
I think what he's trying to say is, how deep can you go with this? I mean,
Yeah.
So this is the level of detail that we have today. We don't go any further down than these categories. For example, under school staffing and supports, we don't go any deeper than learning loss and mental health services and supports and the other two. I don't know if that answered your question.
can you use a school example? Does it match up as to a school as to how much they've allocated for learning loss?
It's not by school.
It's only by general category.
Yes, sir.
And that's as deep as it's going right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
These are big numbers.
And I'm sure we'll be using this over the next year as we look at the budget, and particularly with the Esser stabilization or whatnot. How do we have any plans to make it go any deeper over the next few months?
I have heard discussions about wanting to go deeper. So we really look to the board for direction on what's going to be useful, what's going to be helpful, and then we can begin to look at what's involved in getting that level of detail that you might be looking for. Does that help?
I know some board members have asked if we can identify vendors.
I've heard that as
I
well.
think that's when you're going deep, it just seems that you really need to be able to allocate to each different. I know we have the acceleration schools, we have the charter schools. Charter schools, that's a set number, so it's really, I wouldn't have to go deep on that because it really not much we can do about that. But I do think we need to go deeper to tie in, and there's no question being able to show what vendors have been receiving the lion's share of this money applied to what schools, especially when we start going through the analysis to what's working, what's not working, what specific vendors working, what vendor is not working. This is kind of late in the process to be doing it, but at least we got to start.
Got it. So, Ms. Carlin, Ms. Sizzler, do you want to say anything about that at this point, or should we just take that back?
The only thing I wanted to say is that we are posting expenditures monthly on the website. So and it is sorted by vendor, and I believe it has location on it as well. So while you can't see that John Smith vendor has been paid $50,000 over the course, you can see that in June he was paid $5,000, $10,000 sorted by that vendor.
Right.
Thank you.
And that was in my conversations with the Inspector General. That was one of the biggest concerns, was vendors and cumulative expenses. So having that ability to really look at it to see if we're applying by the procurement laws is critical. Same thing with when we get to talking about, the 250 for board approval. I mean, when you see even just one at 249,000, that is a major red flag. Just one. So the Inspector General was very clear as to giving it right. I mean, not, just saying these are things that board members should be looking for. And Esser is starting to be a hot topic, and we really need to look at this. I think it's a very friendly user dashboard. I'm really impressed with your work. I just don't think it goes deep enough.
Ms. Huggins, can you talk about how y'all will be using this dashboard when we start looking at the evaluations for programs?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. What we have done is developed a system whereby we'll use the key components on the fund here to identify which line items to assess. And we reviewed that generally with Mr. Gabrowski last week, Mr. Calhoun, but and you and some other board members who were able to log on to that. But we'll certainly be using that as we develop those deep dives, particularly on the curriculum instruction side of the house, which, as you know, utilizes a lot of the funding between that and the mental health supports.
So do you see anything that you will need added or that will be beneficial for you during for that within the dashboard?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we can work with Mr. Buckeister to see what's practical in this at this point for adjustments up there. And we can certainly provide, as Dr. Gallion suggested, some links in our weekly board brief that might give a little more granularity based on what the board and the chair just mentioned that you all would like to see in regards to vendors. But yes, sir, I see a lot here that we can use as we analyze, and Kenny and his team have been helpful thus far with us in identifying aspects for review.
I'm sorry, last question. We're gonna get, you said we'll be getting this, the board members will be getting it by tomorrow, and then the community members will be getting it next week?
I'm actually prepared to send it out to you this afternoon, right after the meeting. Yes, and committee members, community committee members by early next week.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Because when I look at the dashboard, it's really just a summary of what you eloquently stated. It is posted as to what the expenditures are, and this brings it up to date. But it's that 40,000 foot level, and that's just not going to fly. That's not how you assess a program, whether it's working expenditures. I mean, we need to go a little deeper. You need to tie it into the schools, and then hopefully when the data starts coming out as positive, that's been reported, then it's really going to be a very, very helpful tool. And this fall in trying to find if we can, and what we should be going forward with. So.
Yeah, and our original charter.
It is a great start.
Thank you. Our original charter for this was to ensure that we were moving towards using the money efficiently and making sure that we were actually just to give visibility to where we were in the spend in terms of how much of each of the three funds was left remaining, and keeping in mind the expiration dates of each fund. So that we were on track with spending. But I hear what you're saying about more detail, more granularity. So we'll definitely look at that.
Because it's almost like trying to understand how many schools are funding so many positions that they need to start having these hard conversations, knowing that these positions aren't going to be around. So, and I know that may sound like being nitpicky, but it's just such a huge issue that's going to start in September. And I have all the faith in staff in working with these principals so that they understand this. Because it just seems like there's a heavy reliance, and you look at the big numbers without going down another level or two is really not showing how heavy the reliance really is.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kenny. I appreciate you.
All right, certainly.
Excellent work.
Thank you.
So also in the packet is the May 2023 Esser update. I'll go through really quickly. So Esser 1 obviously has been spent and reimbursed to date. Esser 2 FY23 actual to date is approximately $21.8 million. And we've covered a little over 3 million. Remaining left to be spent is approximately 3.5 million. And we have been reimbursed to date on all of our expenditures. For Esser 3, the FY23 actual to date expenditures are 57.7 million. We've encumbered approximately 11.7 million, and remaining to be spent is approximately 81.9 million. And we have been reimbursed for everything we've spent to date. And that concludes the Esser expending report for May 2023.
And Darren, you may want to step in on this since you were a member of this meeting that we had with staff on Thursday at Dr. Cobb, who we were told is overseeing the Esser 3 funding. I almost have to recommend it. I don't understand. It's the first time I've ever met him was on Thursday. I know there's been some switching around. I guess when did he start? In February? But this is the man that is supposedly very heavily involved in the assessment of what projects we have or how we're spending the money. We were provided with a document that was last updated last year. So, and I know there was some discussion that we're still waiting for some further data that's got to come through, but it just seems like we don't, I know staff has this feeling, but if you're trying to report this to the public, there's just nothing. I mean, and it was a great meeting that we had. I wish we'd had it probably back in February, and that's on me, not understanding it. But it's almost like I'd like Dr. Cobb to be here and take questions from the Audit and Finance Committee. But then at the same time, a lot of this on the assessment side of it should be directed to education, the Education Committee.
So
That's not really our job. Our job is to allocate the money.
Sure.
So I'm going to push my fellow board members to start being actively involved with you, especially on the Educational Committee, because they're the ones that have the expertise to do it. And we can look at it and say, this is an awful lot of money that's going to one vendor and it's not breaking the procurement rules. That's our job. But, to really sit here and hone in on what's working, what's not working, I mean, that's staff's job and the Education Committee's job to really start, being involved.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Grabowski. In fairness to you and the Audit and Finance Committee, John Cobb, Mr. Cobb took over federal programs, which encompassed Esser back in September. And so, again, in fairness to you all, it's really the managers of each department to work and assess. So Mr. Cobb has a high level view and certainly knows the day-to-day workings of Esser and our balances and works with us to amend and works with principals to adjust. But it's really the staff, the Lisa Allison, for example, and Mrs. Simmons' shop, who manages mental health and well-being, and then Mr. Baroe, who manages safety and security, who can report out on those things to you. So in fairness, you and the board are asking the right questions. You're doing your due diligence. You're looking for the high level things. And John, certainly we can certainly have him attend. In essence, though, it'll be associate superintendents who can report out on the efficiency of Esser 3 funding in schools, where not as much of our money is allocated as to safety and some other high level mental health supports that we've allocated to students. So we appreciate your wanting and apologizing maybe for not being more involved earlier, but certainly I think you're asking the right questions, and it's staff's responsibility and each managers to oversee the effectiveness of funds spent and report that to the board.
Yeah, like I said, Mr. Borley and Ms. Carlin do a great job of showing where the money's going. I have I have all the faith in the world that we know where the money's going. The question is, it's not kind of like our job to be saying, this is proven. This is why we really need to get this education and start this year off right, to get the transparency. I think it should see more work on them. So when they come and tell me, fine, go ahead and fund it. It's easy instead of, us having to look at something, and Darren, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, how deep do we go? I mean, we're concerned about the vendors and, where it's going. But as to the assessment side of it.
The assessment definitely needs to, yes, I see exactly what you're saying, which means we need to look at our policy very deeply and set up these different committees, be it the SEC, be it the policy committee, so they can all work the same way that we're working, get them some charter to have them working the same way that we're working on the funding side. So by the time it goes through their committees, it can come to us and then we can send it to the board. As opposed to going through a column and having everything else. But that's something we can work on going forward. And I did just want to make it clear also, Mr. Dr. Cobb started the federal programs in September. He's been with the district for a long time, a very long time.
That's correct, Mr. Calhoun. You might remember him from back when he was a principal out at Drayton Hall and even before then. So John's been with us a very, very long time and has expertise and skills across the system. And we were grateful that he was willing to step in when Mr. Hamer transitioned to help us lead federal programs and oversee Esser spending. That support he's been able to offer principals in regards to the amendment specifically has been very helpful.
Absolutely.
Ms. Chairman?
Yes, so I have one question. So since Dr. Cobb, you said, has the overview of all of this, is he the one helping Ms. Carlin and her staff find the funding for the teacher bonus?
So we're glad you asked. We had a meeting just today on that, and it's really a team approach so that we have it on our, Dr. Gallion has asked us to add it to our cabinet agenda on Tuesday, where the chiefs will then be directed to work collaboratively with their staffs and John and Mr. Cobb to appropriately allocate funding. So yes, ma'am.
And lastly, as we move on, Esser, we had talked on Thursday. I brought up the point about this public committee that by the plans, the initial plan was supposed to be not only help developing how to use the money, but to be reporting to the board on a semester basis the progress that we were doing. And I'm hoping staff really starts working, puts that committee together again, because it's already appointed. And that's the committee needs to be reporting probably to the education and the education committee. Because once again, if the education committee is reporting to us, it's much easier for our job in improving, the funding. But I really think that public committee needs to be started back up, and because you had 6 very good people that were involved in the beginning, and it just seems like they came in, helped you start it, and then haven't heard from them since. And under the plan, it says they're supposed to be reporting to us on a semester basis. So I highly recommend that be considered again. Any further questions? Then I think we will move on to item 3C. Got that one right, which is the monthly financial report.
Thank you. So this financial update is for May, and it was completed on June 19th. So actual revenues are projected to be around $14.4 million over budget, and this is mostly due to an increase in local taxes as well as an increase in interest earned. Actual expenditures are projected to be around $11.7 million under budget, and this is mostly due to savings in salaries and benefits. Total transfers, you'll note, are approximately $10.8 million over budget, and we've talked about this before, and this is mainly because of the enrollment change between budget versus 45-day versus 135-day. One of the things we have finalized are the charter school payments, but we have not finalized the final June payment from So I'm just bringing that up because once that is finalized, that number may increase a little bit. And that final reconciliation will be done with Meeting Street Academy in the next couple of weeks. And so looking ahead, we still don't have final TIF numbers. We should have those from the Charleston County Treasurer's Office in the next couple of weeks when they send us their final June reconciliation. We did get our final number for the economic rebates, which we talked about earlier. We had budgeted about $1 million more than we should have. So that's definitely going to help not only this budget, but we also showed that in our FY24 budget. And so through May 31st, we're projecting a $7.3 million surplus of revenues over expenditures. And we hope that this number will be consistent, if not more, with the June reconciliation. And that concludes the May financial update.
Excellent. Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, we will move forward to item 3D, which is the arbitrage rebates.
Yes, thank you. So we engage with a firm known as Amtech that calculates all of our arbitrage computations on our short-term and our long-term borrowings. And this particular arbitrage statement or information is coming from our 2023 tax anticipation notice that we borrowed, which was approximately $60 million. And the reason why we have an arbitrage amount is because we earned approximately $1.3 million on those TAN proceeds over the course of part of the fiscal year from September to March. And so because we earned a higher yield than the original bond yield, we earned too much money on these TAN proceeds. So we owe approximately $554,795 because of that. You can't borrow money and let it sit, in a high interest bank and make money off of it. And so one of the things that Amtech does is they make sure that we're not doing that intentionally. And with interest rates being so high in our cash accounts, we do owe most of this money that we earned in interest. We owe that back. Any questions on that? And I wanted to show historically, we have had this happen. Just this year, it was the highest we've ever seen. And we just wanted to be transparent and share this with you and the board.
So how do we avoid that? I mean, obviously I like making money, but I hate giving it back.
This is going to get worse.
So one of the things we have to look at is our preliminary cash flows. That helps us determine what we need to borrow for the tax anticipation note. We just need to take a closer look at that and make sure that we're falling in line. We base it on prior year actual. So something tripped us up along the way. And so Stephanie Nettis is our finance director, our accounting director. She's actually taken a closer look at this as well. It's not something that we intentionally do or want to do. We always earn more interest than we have to pay, but still it doesn't look good. So
It's 500 is big.
That's a very big number. We were surprised. Yes.
No question. We all know why. I mean, obviously, last year, who knew that we would be up at, 8, 9 on savings. So.
Yes, sir. So.
But I'm glad you're looking at it because, man, 500, and that's really, we're just returning interest that we gain. So it's not costing us anything. It's just, we'd like to hold on to it.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, we will move on for items for the board meeting.
Oh, no, we got 6E and 6F. 3E and 3F.
Excuse me?
We have 3E and 3F that you amended the agenda for.
Charter.
Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. It's 3F is the charter.
3E first.
3E, you're right. I'm sorry. 3E. 3E is the charter. So I've been working with Ms. Carlin on getting the charter to you in a draft form. The only sticking point we're having right now, and I really wanted the committee to discuss this, was how far to lower the 250,000 mark for board approval. you know, I had in my last draft and in discussing with other districts and other people up in Columbia had lowered it down to 100,000. And talking to Ms. Carlin, she felt that that was a little low and that would be overburdensome and an awful lot of information for the board to be thinking about. And so we don't want to create a micromanaging type of situation with the board. Generally speaking, everybody agrees that 250 is just way too high. I mean, I haven't heard anybody that said that that's even reasonable, that it definitely needs to be down below 200,000. So I put it up for the committee for consideration. And I actually, you know, Ms. Carlin, if you're going to defend, you know, or if you thought more of as to what a number would be, you know, is 150 the magical number that we should try and see what that looks like, knowing that we can always come back? Is that, you know, but I also put it up for the committee for, you know, consideration. I don't want to think this is, you know, because I will be presenting to the committee for consideration a draft copy, you know, to start looking at in August.
I have not had a chance to discuss this with my new superintendent, but I feel that the $250,000 threshold is pretty fair for a district our size with the multi-billion dollar budget that we have across all of our funds. We struggle with the 250,000, trying to get this up to date and to the Audit and Finance Committee and to the board in a timely manner. I am concerned from a staff viewpoint, how to handle 100,000, 150,000.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
But I'm even more
That's
concerned.
way too low. I agree with you there.
But I'm even more concerned about what it's going to do to our major stakeholders, which is our students and our schools. I think I discussed with you the other day in the hallway about furniture. If we had 3 classrooms, we wanted to order new furniture for that.
Mhm.
So we're looking at approximately anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to get it through on the list, to get it through Audit and Finance Committee, to get it through the board. And that's even before the procurement process takes place. You know, anything over $100,000, it has to be advertised. So I'm really concerned if we lower below the $250,000 threshold, what it would do to us as a district and to our students and to our schools.
And this is why I wanted the committee to hear this as a whole. So it's not just a conversation that Mrs. Carlin and I are having. But that is, you know, everything else is a lot of it is to go back, you know, a lot of language was changed in it that, you know, took for whatever reason, took audit and finance out of overseeing operational things. And it just, when you look at our policy and you look at the main charter and you look at the law, we just have to be involved in that. So I don't know why some of these changes were made. So when you see the recommendations coming in August, and I'll be presenting them to Darren, he'll be, you know, put in, but the only sticking point that I saw was that amount. And I just would ask the committee to think about it. So when we come and present it, because we have to present it to staff for review before I send it out to you so that you all understand the process. So that's all. It was really more of an informational side of it to let you know what's coming ahead in August. Darren, you have any?
I would just like to see a comparison of where other districts are within the state, and also a comparison of districts of our equal size, probably, I guess, even within the Southeast. What thresholds are they looking at? Somebody with a similar size budget, so we can go off of that. Because it may be that they have a higher threshold, it may be that they have lower thresholds, but I would like to be on level with the other districts that are our size.
I think that's a fair assessment. But I think everything else was pretty routine as to what we were changing. That was the only one I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware of, that, you know. Okay, moving on to item 3F, which is we have 2 committee members that have been proposed. And it's my understanding from, you know, looking at the policy and everything that what really should be done is that Ms. Carlin needs to provide Darren and I the information, and then we propose it to the board. It's really not something, you know, for the committee to be discussing. So what I would like to do, with the understanding that we really can't do anything. Well, I guess this was really the question. Since this is not going to Cal, and since we report directly to the board, I think Darren and I can look at the information, see if these 2 people are qualified for recommendation to the board, and the board can consider it at the July 17th meeting.
I don't believe we've ever not had the entire committee look at prospective members.
Hmm. How hard, since we're going to have a special meeting anyway, how hard would it be to get it to us by the 13th? Because
I can do that. I already have
okay,
that
that's fine. Then
information.
let's do it that way.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Well, could we put that first so we could just go to knock that out?
Excuse me. Yeah, it's just looking, it's just two people. One's Misty Walsh and the other one, I think, I think it's my
Mr.
case.
Sabelli,
Javelli, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got all the information. They just need to distribute it to the, put it on so that the board can look at it, look at the verification. I mean, the committee members, and then we can make the recommendation. That's
What's-
fair enough.
What's the genesis of the additions? I mean, I know when we added, we added IT, we added procurement as specific capabilities that the
Mhm.
committee was wanting to add. What's the genesis of the new positions? Are there specific skill sets that are being targeted?
I think the main thing is I just felt we needed one or two more people to make sure that when we have meetings that we have a very robust discussion. I mean, and a lot of it's, you've been on how long? I mean, you're great. I mean, I truly hang on every word, but I just think diversifying a little more in the community. One of these members, I think, is coming from James Island. I think the other one I'd have to look against coming from over at Mount Pleasant. So it was really more of just, having.
So did we advertise for those positions like we did with each?
No,
other
it's
position?
always by recommendations. Yeah, by board recommendations, board members.
That seems like an odd process, right? Like I know,
Hmm.
like when I joined, I saw an ad in the paper. And I know we solicited when we got, the additional IT expertise, and I presume we did the same when we got additional procurement expertise. It just seems like an unusual process to do, at least in the companies I work with, it's frowned upon to just go out and say, I want this person, right? Yeah, there's, for a variety of reasons, we generally try to solicit publicly for positions we're trying to fill.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure we're not I don't know if I mean, this isn't a job. There's no comp involved. So there's probably not any legal requirement to solicit, but.
Well, there is in our charter, but these two board members are different than what you and the other ones that have been voted or have applied for it. This is a little bit different. This was, both of these individuals were recommended by a board member.
Gotcha.
So.
How did we do health and finance? Was that a job posting? I mean, not a job posting. Was that a listing or is that by recommendation too?
Mr. Grabowski, I'm not 100%, but I do know that on the health committee, there
Yeah,
are
the
certain
health committee. I'm sorry, the
protocols.
health committee.
Yes, sir. There are certain protocols and folks apply to that, as Mr. Griffin has suggested here. They apply to that and that's reviewed. I can get that process and share it with you, but I do recall that audit and finance positions are typically solicited in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, for the health and advisory one, I saw all those postings out on Facebook.
Yes,
Looking
sir.
for
They apply to that. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Duke.
I mean, they can certainly both serve on the committee, but not be actual committee members, if they're interested in just being more involved. So.
Might I suggest, Mr. Grabowski, that we research this more and come back and share with the Audit and Finance Committee how these things are done, and then you all.
I think they'd be wise. I think
so
that's the way
too,
to handle
before
it.
we-
I think to
Yes.
look back on historical, see how we've done it. If we've posted it, we should post it in a story. Okay. So I think that's why I wanted to talk about it, to the committee members instead of just doing something. So we'll hold off on and this doesn't have to be done at the next meeting. This can be held off to August because you got a lot on your plate right now. And I don't want to, we've got a good committee right now. There's robust discussions and, we're digging into it, but I want to do it right. And if we need to post it, let's do it that way. With that being said, now we can move on to item 4, which is items for the board meeting action items.
Can I just, one topic just before we get into that?
Sure.
Sorry, I know it's not on the agenda, but I just wanted to follow up from our last meeting. There was we recommended approval on doing some analysis on a TIF. Right? And I think you all are going down that process of doing the analysis. I was just going to suggest or ask that we have some discussion before they get too far down the path. What I don't want to do is have them get to the end of their analysis, come back and report, and us say, well, we want to know this, we want to know that. I don't want them to come with a finished analysis that is up against the deadline where we say, but we want to know about X or Y. Because so I think it should be at least one conversation. I don't know if the whole committee needs to do it. I know I'm interested in doing it, but I don't want to take the whole committee's time, but I want to make sure that we think about a couple different scenarios so that we are positioned to make a full decision.
Yeah, and I think we only have one.
Correct.
And so it's, I'm trying to think of how we would, I think staff's just got to look into that and see if there's, a time period or a percentage period of completion where they may want to come in and just say, hey,
this is the kind of
this
work
is
we're
where
doing.
we're getting to. Are you going to be able to stomach this?
Yeah.
Or make sure they're looking at the right things.
Mr. Griffin, we'll get with Mr. Burrow and Ms. Carlin, and and we'll come back and be prepared to run those things by you.
And if the rest of the committee doesn't want to do this, I'm not trying to take everybody's time. I'm happy to do it with a few others if they want to do it, but either
Thank
way.
you for that. We appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's get these items listed for the board meeting. Items for the board, action items for the board meeting. Obviously, the approval of the board is going to be postponed until after our audit and finance meeting. So do we have the approval of contracts over 250,000? The fixed cost of ownership. It's an action item. And that's it. Other than that,
The
just
second
everything
reading
else
is
is
to go on
information.
there. Oh, okay. I thought the second reading is going to go on there for the board.
Right.
Okay,
Second
thank you.
read's definitely going on there. Yeah, definitely.
Trina just said the action items and the information items will all get forwarded to the board. So we're good.
Good. The upcoming meetings is on August 1st, 2020. No, the upcoming meeting is the special meeting that we're having on the 13th. And then we can also announce that the regularly scheduled meeting will be on August 1st, 2023. With that being said, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Out of here.